Greetings everyone. It is time to discuss in more details all those reasons why I believe it's necessary to launch a channel for university students which are interested in more topics than what they are taught at current Western universities. Well, this video will have 4 sections. First, I will describe shortly all those triggering issues that made me think and made me plan a new channel for university students. The second part will describe the theoretical limits of academic freedom and freedom of speech at academia. The third section will describe the ideal case where I learned and when I was studying, and it was a historically unique constellation of events. The fourth section will describe the current status of academic freedom in Western countries, and this will lead to a conclusion to show you what areas I might be able to provide new insights for academics and everyone who is interested in politics and economics. So, the current status of freedom of speech and the imminent triggers for me. Well, I live in New Zealand, and in the beginning of May there was an event organized at Victoria University of Wellington, and later on the event was cancelled because the organizers invited the chief executive of the Free Speech Union here, and it turned out that he was a realistically minded person of common sense and who might have reasons to argue against the ruling principles of the university, which is quite woke and based on identity politics and also based on victimhood. Now, after the cancellation, the chief executive of this union was accused of participating in events that led to violence. Of course, he wasn't the cause of violence. It was indeed the woke people who subscribed to that ideology. Anyway, the event was cancelled, and in the beginning of May there were emerging stories about students who self-censored themselves and who censored their mates because in a seminar there was a question how migration might affect housing issues in New Zealand, and after the seminar mates were warning each other that hey, if you raise this question that might lead to racism. And this shows that there is a kind of fear already in academic circles. Students are not brave enough to raise questions freely, and this kind of fear spreads also among teachers. In 2021 there were several academics at the University of Auckland who published an open letter criticizing the then ruling Six Labour government, which wanted to include Matauranga Maori into the science curriculum. Now, what is Matauranga Maori? It is a collection of practical advice, many advice. For example, when to plant seeds, which season is best, which timing of the year is best. But yeah, it is based on experiments and it's based on trials and errors. So in their roots it's scientific, but altogether it is just a collection of habits. It cannot constitute a full paper. Well, actually it can constitute one paper only, let's say an elective paper, but making it compulsory and part of the science curriculum is not based on any traditional academic recommendation. Now, although the university claimed that they have academic freedom, later on all the teachers who subscribed these mails and open letters were fired. Now, when teachers are afraid of express their opinions freely, that shows academia is not free in their pursuits of knowledge. It's obvious. It is striking. Well, the situation is not better in other countries either. When I remember that the Canadian guy, Jordan Peterson, when he resigned, he warned that he could not take responsibility for any more supervision of PhD students because he didn't see any chances for the prospective students to get jobs, because he didn't subscribe to the woke ideology. His students would not subscribe to that. Therefore, they would not be able to get jobs. It was that simple. He felt responsibility. Now, Canada, New Zealand, also Australia has this problem. When I read job advertisements at universities, I realize when I read that Torres Straits Islanders are encouraged to apply, that means, yeah, the university wants to employ someone from the Torres Straits. Okay, I understand, but still, the best person should fill the job. Now, this is the striking reality in Western universities, and I don't think European universities, mostly the Germans and the French ones, are any different. Now, this is only one minuscule section of academic freedom, but it is relevant because it is originally coming from left-leaning political parties, and right-leaning political parties don't agree with them. Therefore, this opposition keeps it public. But there are other limits of academic freedoms which are not public. They are not really widely known. Now, what are these? I can differentiate 4 ones. Interestingly, all 4 initial is a P. Now, the easiest to define is the principled one. We need to understand that there are issues which are best not talked about at all. We just have to think about possible natural disasters, and if they are publicly talked about, the hysteria and the panic reaction might cause more damage than the actual event itself. And there are various topics within academic circles that teachers just keep to themselves, and because of their own responsible attitude. I know some of these, but understandably I will not talk about, and in this video I will not address this topic as well either. Now, the second one is the principled limits are systemic. Now, the second type of limit, the personal limit, when a teacher's pride comes as a block for students. Now, that's not systemic. Students can decide or choose another teacher, and even early career academics, when they want to publish something, they can turn to other journals to publish their papers. So it can be walked and worked around, but yeah, it is also uncomfortable when someone writes an article and the proud teacher feels compromised or criticized. They might attack the author. I faced this kind of attacks before. I feel sorry for my critics, but because eventually I came out right. But this happens. It's uncomfortable. However, it is not systemic. Now, the third reason why we might have limit of academic freedom is the so-called paradigmatic limit. Now, the paradigmatic limits are systemic. What are these? Paradigm is defined by Thomas Kuhn in his famous book. He wrote the book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and in that book he defined that actually revolutions occur when one scientific paradigm is replaced by another. However, they don't exist in separate worlds. An existing paradigm might still rule academic circles, but an emerging paradigm is already coming up. However, in the beginning, the old paradigm might offer more tangible even political gains or even economic gains. And therefore, the old paradigm still rules. And a paradigm is not just a scientific tradition, it is a theory, and it defines its own research methods as well, and it can define the research topics as well. Now, just one example. Currently, we still suffer and face the neoliberal economic regimes. Now, neoliberalism has its own methods and has its own discussing topics, and it excludes any topics which cannot be grabbed and described by their own methods. I faced this limit. It was harsh. For example, neoliberal economists might believe that anything which is not quantifiable, that doesn't even exist. Now, with this claim, they exclude so ordinary concepts like love, friendship, or not to mention all those abstract social phenomenon like justice, fair society. They describe it, or business ethics. It doesn't exist for them. Now, there are challenging and new emerging scientific paradigms, for example, dynamic games theories, which can already prove that the neoliberal thinking is not good, not the best. However, they cannot yet provide enough evidence that in macroeconomics they might work, they might offer better models. Therefore, neoliberal economic principles still rule our economic political life. Also, in academia, I don't think economic departments have so many students that they are free in their research and they can freely fund their own research. They still need to rely on governmental funding. Therefore, they cannot be free of the neoliberal economic paradigm. It is sad, but we have to face there are paradigmatic limits to academic freedom. Now, the fourth one is also systemic. This is the political type of limitations. Now, what I mentioned in the introduction is when the opposing political parties don't agree on something. But when there is bipartisan or even multipartisan agreement over topics, that those topics should not be discussed in academia, now that is what creates a limitation. And trust me, in Western countries, and especially in Anglo-Saxon countries, there are bipartisan agreements over political events, historical events, which are not discussed. And anyone who might raise the topics might touch a taboo, and those people might be discriminated from academia. I will not mention examples here, but later when I talk about the status of the Western economy, Western universities, I will mention one concept which might be interesting for a start. All right. This is also systemic. Once there is bipartisan agreement over a topic, it's systemic. Universities cannot discuss them. Unfortunate, yeah, but that's what we have. And now, but okay, coming to the third point of this little talk, the ideal case of university research and academic freedom. I was happy to grow up in Central Europe, where between 1989 and 2004 there was a grace period of academic freedom. There was a constellation of events and trends that made it possible. Therefore, I have experience about real and ideal academic freedom, and when I see the limitations in any segment of it, I am sensitive for that. Nevertheless, I am happy and I am lucky to learn all those aspects what I could have about the world, and I want to share these because they will challenge two limitations. Now, in Hungary, where I was growing up, after the 1989 collapse of the Soviet Union and the communist bloc, the new political elites felt free of their predecessors. And because communism was introduced after 1945, all the elites before communism were already dead. They died away. So the new political elite felt free to discuss anything, and they also felt guilt-free. So in their mind there was no limitation to discuss any historical events, especially foreign policy intentions and foreign policy agendas. That showed me, even the first government of Hungary was a so-called academic government, because many ministers in the government was historian. And after the first government was replaced by a new one, I could study with one of their ministers, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and he could talk freely about how they were thinking about the territories what Hungary lost in the First World War, and how they would facilitate the interest of the Hungarian minorities in the surrounding countries. It was such an openness that I can't imagine anything better than that. They honestly admitted that yes, if there was a historical or opportunity to grab those lost territories back, they would grab it. So this kind of honesty helped us a lot, and this is what I never saw in Western countries. And there was another constellation during the communist era. The Communist Party emphasized equality, and there was a system of transparent wages and salaries, and everybody knew who earned and what. And there were no real distinction between people. There was no high inequality in incomes, and even the gender pay gap was practically non-existent. Everyone's wage and salaries were transparent, and it helped a lot. So practically the identity politics could not get a strong momentum in Central Europe or in Hungary. Now, because of the openness of the new political elite, they wanted to learn the best practices of the world, and similarly academics wanted to learn the new ideologies as well. Uh, because of this openness, there was no personal limitations either, because the old generation of academics practically just resigned and retired because they knew they had to learn a lot of new things and they believed they were not capable of doing that. So early career academics got free hand to learn and teach whatever they wanted. It was amazing, and they could institute real critical thinking. They could teach philosophy, and they could critically think about economics, and it was fascinating. Now, why this period ended was an unfortunate thing, but actually I just have to admit that all those historical forces were coming to play anyway. In 2004, the Central European countries joined the European Union, and at the time the European Union was led by a left-leaning bureaucrat, José Manuel Barroso, who attempted to help left-leaning political parties in the newly joined countries, in the new member countries. And the right-leaning political parties wanted to get foreign assistance as well. Unfortunately, they turned to the Putin-led Russia. And after 2004, practically critical thinking stopped to exist in all Central European countries. In the one hand, the left-leaning woke ideology wanted to gain ground. On the other hand, the religious and conservative thinking wanted to establish their grounds as well. And in their debates, real critical thinking was exiled. That's why I live in New Zealand as well. I couldn't live in Hungary anymore. Now, because I knew what freedom can exist, I immediately assessed the Western limitations. Now, in Western countries, as I said, I am not talking about the principled limitations. They are quite the same. But in terms of personal limitations, now I would say that teachers are pretty proud here, and maybe they have some kind of minority complex or megalomania, but they don't really endure personal criticism about their works. However, as I mentioned, it can get worked around. In terms of paradigmatic limitations, unfortunately, after the COVID pandemic with the Ukraine war, the separation between scientists of Western countries and Russia and the BRICS countries is getting stronger. Now, imagine that in 2004 in Madrid there was a conference about long-term economic cycles, and the NATO scientists met with Russian counterparts. They shared their ideas. Can we imagine such a situation now? I don't think so. Because of the separation of worlds, the existing paradigms in Western universities will not face strong challenge. They will not be informed about new topics and new research agendas and new discoveries. They mutually exclude one another. It is sad, but yeah, that's what we have. In terms of bipartisan political limitations, I would say it is surprisingly strong. It even limits students learn the fair views of history. It's unbelievable to me, and it is quite shocking. As I promised, I mentioned one concept. It is the Anglo-Saxon exceptionalism. What does this mean? Because Anglo-Saxon countries have a long track record of being democratic, and because they could sustain democracy for a long time, they believe their national interests are universally good. Obviously, it is a mistaken thinking, but even those academics who are aware of this problem, they still fall for it. And when they teach, they cannot oversee the boondoggle of interests, what they are in, and eventually what they conclude is teaching what is the best interest of their own countries. And this puts students into a detrimental position because they just cannot learn the overall, the holistic view of the world. Now this is a problem, and it is rarely talked about, if at all. Now I hope I could help you with understanding why it is important to look for alternative universities where alternative knowledge is taught. And in this analysis, it is already clear that actually the paradigmatic limits is one area what this channel can address, and the other limitation is the systematic political agreement over historical events. Now, this is the two areas what I will discuss in more details in the coming videos. Stay tuned. The next video will be about the contours of American foreign policy. Hopefully I can compose it within a couple of days. And yeah, I hope this helped, and see you in the next one.